Hey you guys, Sergeant BT here. Let's take a quick trip down memory lane. Remember that one time Captain Chaos and I met Super Crime Buster? That was a fun day. Or the time he helped the Johnson family against that computer hacker. Yoga? Nah, not for me. Next. Or that time in court with Judge Mint. ADA just in case went up against Scott Free, Rob You Blind, Treacherous Tony, and of course Chance Wilder. Treacherous Tony conducting illegal activity at a basketball court. In the summer months when we had to educate kids about dirt bikes and four-wheelers on the roadway. Rob You Blind attempting a burglary. Yep, he got caught. Frequent flyers Rob You Blind and Chance Wilder, they get caught often. Remember the time Captain Chaos and I visited Miss Gaynor's classroom? Yeah, I think he's got a crush on her. Then there was cuffing season with the smoke detector, no gas, and the free coffee. Or this poor guy who had to go up against Nasty Nina and her attorney, Wacky Tacky. Or how about the time Rob You Blind and Treacherous Tony got into that traffic accident while drinking and driving? They really thought they were going to run away. These and many more adventures can be seen on our YouTube page and also during the podcast Black and Blue. Don't forget to watch us and subscribe, and that's your tip of the day to get you on your way.
Welcome to Black and Blue, the podcast that's just for you. We bring solutions to everyday problems. We are here to humanize the badge. By interviewing first responders and discussing their trainings, experiences, and publications. Black and Blue airs weekly at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Tune in.
Welcome to Black and Blue, the podcast that brings you the untold stories behind the badge. Every week at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we dive deep into the lives of our unsung heroes, the first responders and law enforcement officers who put their lives on the line to protect us all. So join us as we humanize the badge. We shed light on the incredible individuals who wear it proudly. From rookies just starting out on their journey to seasoned vets with years of experience. Even retirees who continue to make a difference in their communities. Come with us and discover the trainings that mold us. The unforgettable experiences that make us. And the publications that inspire us to push forward. So buckle up and get ready to embark on a thrilling journey through the lives of those who protect and serve. This is the Heartbeat, Black and Blue. Black and Blue, where the stories behind the badge are true. And we are live. Happy New Year, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. This is our first show of the year. I know you guys are excited as I am. I'm happy to be back here. This is Black and Blue. This is the podcast that is just for you. We go live weekly at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And when we go live, we have a wonderful guest, and we interview them, whether they're rookie season or retiree, and we discuss their trainings, their experiences, and their publications. And I'm looking for we got an all-star lineup this entire month and this year. We're taking this year by charge. Hope you guys like the new intro. Hope you guys like the new cartoon with Sergeant Be Safe. Again, I'm excited to be here. I hope you guys are too. I'm your host. I'm Coach Clee. Some you know me as Coach Clee. Clee Tillman as Clark Kent. Many different names on many different platforms. You want to know why? Because we're streaming on 5 different platforms. We're on 1 on LinkedIn, we're on 2 on Facebook, and we're on 2 on YouTube. And it'll also be uploaded to Apple and Spotify, probably more likely by tomorrow. So make sure you guys check those pages out. Make sure you tag, like, and share. Hit the like button because likes are free. And we want to keep this show going because the information here is wonderful. We like to humanize the badge. I am your motivational speaker, your empowerment coach, your author, and your favorite baker's favorite baker. And this is a live show. So make sure that you guys have, if you want the shout out that you're looking for, you got to put your name and where you're from in the comments section because all the different platforms we're on, I can't see who's on here. So make sure you put your name and where you're from, and I'll give you that shout out that you're looking for. If you have a question, put that in the comments section as well, and we'll acknowledge your question to the best of our ability. Understand there's about a 5 to 10 second delay, so we'll get to those questions as soon as we can. If you're watching the replay, put your questions in there, and we'll get back to them as well. All right. I'm glad that you guys are here. I hope you guys had a wonderful holiday season. A safe new year. We're here with Black and Blue. We're going to be moving this thing forward. Let me get this banner correct. You know, this platform is sponsored by One Way Publishing. One Way Publishing is the book publishing company where I got to write my 5 books. And not only that, they produce so many other books with their different clients on there. Workwithclee.com is the website you want to utilize to be a guest on the show. So if you want to do help do voiceovers for Sergeant Be Safe, and or if you're interested in writing your own book. And speaking of writing your own books, let me get these up here. Kay Childs just wrote, after 30 years of wondering, she just wrote her first book, her poetry book, and she's very proud of it. It's available on Amazon. Make sure you guys check that out. That just came out right at the beginning of December. It's a lifelong journey. It's lifelong poetry that she's been doing, and she wasn't going to have it published, and she didn't know how she was going to get it published, and One Way Publishing made that happen. Also, children's book, the first children's book through One Way Publishing. You know, One Way Publishing, their motto is they can take a mere thought and turn it into a book that's bought. So to be so tall, as a mother-daughter dynamic duo, they wrote their own children's book, and it's going on tour right now as we speak. So make sure you guys check that out. That's on Amazon as well. And reach out for that, workwithclee.com. Like I said, it's in the comment section, and you see it scrolling below. All right? I got a couple announcements. I'm sorry. Make sure you guys hit those likes, get the platform going. Also, tomorrow is Law Enforcement Appreciation Day. So those of you first responders, law enforcement, you know, we salute you. Thank you for your service. It's a tough job, past, present, and future. But tomorrow is Law Enforcement Appreciation Day, and I thank you because, you know, I'm Coach Clee, and Clee is CLEE, standing for Continuing Law Enforcement Edutainment. And that's exactly what we're going to do today because we got a special guest in the background. Some of you may know who he is. Others of you may not, but we're going to have fun interviewing him. I got his bio. I couldn't get it all in, but it's tremendous. And if you get your questions ready, make sure that you're ready to go because he's got 33 years of law enforcement service, where he's had 21 years at Anchorage. Yes, Anchorage, Alaska Police Department, 12 years with Idaho Post. Post is an acronym standing for Peace Officers Standard and Training. He's a regional coordinator for Post and also a coordinator for Firearms. He's an adjunct instructor and a use of force instructor and expert. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, let me get the banner up here correctly before I bring him to the stage. I want to bring to you Matt Bloodgood. Let me pull him up here on stage. Matt, are you here?
Hey, how's it going?
I'm wonderful. Thank you for making yourself available. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for inviting me on the program. I'm honored to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm excited to have you. I'm starstruck. I know you've got a wealth of experience and a wealth. I know when we were talking on the phone a few weeks ago, just hearing about Alaskan life, period, because that's something that's strange to me because I've never been. I've been to Canada. That's about as far north as I've been, and that's probably been. Oh man, right across Niagara Falls. So that whatever. That area in Canada, that's about as far north as I've been. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your training and experiences. Tell us how you got the bug to get into law enforcement.
Well, the bug, if you will, I think all of us, as we've talked before, all of us have our story on how we got on the job. As a kid growing up, my dad was a reserve police officer in a small town here in Idaho. My grandfather on my mom's side was one of the early pioneers in radio. And back in the 30s, he helped install the radio system for the LAPD and the LASO. And back then, there wasn't anything like a reserve program as I understand it. I mean, this is to me from my dad. And so in order to go out and ride along to make sure that the radio system actually worked, you're in a cop car and you carry a badge and a gun. And so that's what he did. And so I kind of grew up exposed to that. And then when I was about 11 years old, my dad moved us up to Alaska because it was at the height of the pipeline oil days back in the mid 70s, and job opportunities were up there. And so I just kind of grew up in Alaska. And in 92, my dad retired, moved back to Idaho. And I stayed up because by that time I was on the job. I had wasn't sure what I wanted to do with myself. Kind of was just stuck in a job selling car paint. And one day I'm driving through a construction zone and decided to make a stupid decision, if you will, and make a left-hand turn again across 3 lanes of traffic, and didn't clear that last lane of traffic and got T-boned. And so while I'm sitting there in the officer's car, getting my citation for fail to yield, he and I are having a conversation. And I remember last week it was Tim, right?
Tom Sy.
Tom talking about how police officers, your officers or deputies can be your best recruiters. And this is just an example of that. Just sitting in the car, chatting with him, just kind of discussing law enforcement in general. And he suggested, because at that time, Anchorage had a hiring freeze going on, he suggested I look at joining the reserve program. And so I did. And then in February of 1987, got brought on board onto the reserve program. They put us into the academy. And about 3 or 4 weeks later, in the middle of the winter, they've got us out in downtown Anchorage trying to buy dope off of street-level drug dealers. And, from that point on, basically was hooked. And I couldn't get off of it. I mean, I'm sitting there going, good grief, they actually pay people to do this job. And so it took about until December 1990 when I got hired full-time. So then went into the academy, graduated in April of 91, and just started up down that path like all of us. When we come out of the academy, I mean, we all take divergent paths as we go along based on things that happen in your career. And so that's essentially how I got on the job. Ultimately, spent just short, a couple months short, 21 years in the PDs full-time. Spent about 8.5 years of that on the street, working in various capacities, such as bike patrol, worked with the community policing team for a while. I was what was called a uniformed investigator. And so those are officers that have special training to go out process crime scenes. And so that's one of my job functions, was going out and we would process at a street level, with certain exceptions on sexual assaults and homicides. We would process all of the types of crime scenes. And 93, I got selected to the SWAT team, spent 17 and a half years there, working up into a team leader position. And in the last 3 years I was on the job, I was, there was kind of an overlap. There was 3 years where I was the basic academy supervisor, but there was 2 6-month stints where I got pulled out of the academy to go back and work as a member of the full-time SWAT team. Both of those coming on the heels of some officers that were shot. Nice. And then in 2011, this position here at Idaho Post came open. My folks were getting a little long in years, and I needed to be a bit closer to them from up in Alaska. And applied for this position, got it, and here we are. So,
and there we go. That's an interesting story on how you got to get to the seat that you're sitting in right now. And to kind of divert just a little bit, because I know over the phone I asked the same question, because I find it interesting. Can you tell us a little bit about, and it just may be me because I've never experienced it, a little bit about Alaskan life?
Well, Alaska it's a really unique experience for obvious reasons. I mean, there's a lot of mystique about life in Alaska, and everything is so big. And we tease people from Texas all the time because you could divide Alaska in half and both halves will still be larger than Texas. And so there's that. And the diversity in terms of the wilderness areas and the wildlife and the work environment in Anchorage. A lot of people may not realize this, but Anchorage is a very diverse community. When I was working downtown patrol, I had a large Korean community. We dealt with, we had Alaska Natives that were there and Alaska Indians. And it was just broad range, a broad spectrum of people that you get to talk to and meet and have a lot of interesting conversations with about all sorts of stuff. Weather is obviously kind of a big deal, and you kind of get used to those extremes. We would routinely get hurricane force winds. We didn't get the rain like they do along the East Coast and Florida, when hurricanes roll in, but we definitely could see those sustained winds. And you could go from a situation like in January or February, depending on weather conditions, you could go from sub-freezing temperatures to 50 degrees and rain and back to sub-freezing temperatures all within the span of a week.
Wow.
And so it's a very unique environment. Probably a couple good examples I can give you of how unique it is. About 30 minutes from where we lived is a glacier, and we would drive up there, drop our four-wheelers off, hop on those four-wheelers. It's about a 30-mile drive back, and you're going through the river and over rocks and through sand. And there's one point where you kind of round a corner, and if anybody from Alaska is listening to this, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And you kind of round this corner, and you have to stop. And you got to wait for people that are shooting to reload, so then you can take off and drive through the area. And you can get out to the glacier. If you're out there early enough, you can actually get up onto the glacier itself and have lunch, which is stuff that we would do, and then drive back, and you get to see all the wildlife and whatnot that's there. And another example of the unique nature of it is we had a training scenario out on the military base there, and it was a mock hostage taking up in the ski chalet at the top of the mountain. And I remember we were having radio traffic back and forth about, hey, there's a moose over here. Hey, there's a bear over here. Hey, that pack of wolves is over here. Those kinds of conversations. And so you have those types of experiences as well, which are really unique. And I wouldn't trade my career up there for anything. There was part of me that wants to move back there, but there comes a point in time with age and injuries that the cold just to be a little too much.
Yeah. Understood. Thank you for going through that. I appreciate that. Jumping back in the interview, I know that you're the regional coordinator for Post in Idaho. How important is that for law enforcement?
So every state has some board, commission, or council that sets standards and training. Now, I'll tell you, at least on the Idaho side of things, is a minimum level. Okay. And so people that are listening need to be really clear. That's minimum level. So agencies are free to expand upon that, and it's highly recommended that they do. So I know the Post Council has legislative authority to set what those standards are. And then and usually that's centered around the basic academy. And so they'll set how long what the academy length is. They'll set what the curriculum is going to be, and then they have oversight on what the training will actually consist of.
Wow.
And so you have the training side at the basic academy, and then you have the in-service side, which is what the regional coordinators do. So that's my role, is on the in-service side. There's 4 of us throughout the state, and in my region, I have 13 counties. And I have responsibility for everything from juvenile correction, juvenile detention, all the way up through dispatch, police, sheriffs, state police, fish and game, everything. So I've got about 1,100 certified officers or employees in my region. And so my job is to work with the agencies on training. So, like, say, for example, or even individually, so because this happens quite a bit too. Let's say you were working an agency here in Southeast Idaho, and you identified a need that you would like some training, but you're struggling with finding it. Then you'll get a hold of me and say, "Hey, Matt, do you know of class, say, underwater basket weaving for law enforcement?" And so I'll go out and find you that class, and then it's up to you and your agency to get you to it. Or agencies will say, "Hey, can you bring in a class?" And so we'll work together. And one of the things I do is I certify those courses. And so if an agency wants to bring in a vendor, say something from the National Tactical Officers Association, want to bring them in, we have a process by which some of these vendors and organizations are vetted ahead of time. If you said, "Hey, can you I want to bring in a SWAT class from the NTOA," NTOA has already gotten the thumbs up, and so there's not much more I need to do. If you're going to bring in something that is not regionally or nationally known, then we do a course application. We have to approve it, and there's a lot of states that do that. Nevada, California, Texas, for example, you have to get courses pre-approved prior to that course being trained. And sometimes it's evaluated on content. Sometimes it's evaluated to make sure that all the required information is provided. Mm-hmm. So we approve it. Other things that we do, a couple of us will also do in-service training. So I help out with firearms. I help out use of force courses and things of that nature. Most recently, I had one of my local smaller agencies in the northern part of my region ask for help with a de-escalation course. Okay. And so I had gone through Force Science realistic de-escalation instructor class last year, and so I was able to put together a class for them and go up and present that to them. And sometimes we're able to do that for no cost. And then several of us also teach at some of the university law enforcement programs as well.
Right. And I know you created a few courses, like you said, and in the past where you created courses or a curriculum for the courses, I should say, but you didn't know that you were going to present them, and that one of your fears was public speaking. How easy is it for you to do public speaking as of now?
It's not so bad. There's a couple of times where I get a little bit nervous, especially if it's a large group. I'll get a little bit nervous, and then I'll sit back and I'll go, okay, so what's some of the training I've had to deal with some of the stress? And so I'll do combat breathing, right? And I would tell you, combat breathing is more than just breathing because you're going into a rough situation. You can use that in those breathing techniques anywhere where you're feeling some measure of stress. I've done it multiple times sitting in a witness stand. I'll go in and you'll sit, they'll call you up, I'll sit in the witness stand. And I know some officers see testifying in court as fun and as a challenge. I don't. I understand that, either somebody's life or a whole lot of money is at risk here. And so I take it very seriously. And so you're sitting there and you get, that pre-interview jitters, you get. And so while everybody's all this crosstalk going back and forth, just take a second and just do some quick combat breathing or box breathing. It's known to different things. There's some new research that's coming out on cyclic psi or the psychological psi, which is really promising. Can be done a lot faster than typical box breathing. And so, it's just kind of learning that stuff. And, and back in the mid '90s, like I told you, I had zero interest in being an instructor because of, you want to send me into, hey, Matt, go in that building over there. There's a guy in there with a gun. He wants to kill you. Go get him. Okay. All over that. But, put me in front of a class of people. No, I wasn't about to do that. It took every bit of effort I could to get through my speech class in college. And so in long story short, I got hurt in '97. I spent time sitting at home and I wrote the lesson plan for our less lethal weapons program in Anchorage, and I presented it to the department. They said, "Great, go teach it." And so I started teaching it, and then I ended up in an event where I used a 37 millimeter in a suicide intervention, and that just changed the course of my career, and here I am. So,
right. Yeah. So we're talking about use of force and curriculums and being sitting on the stand, being a witness and things like that. What use of force and becoming an expert? It's on you're a use of force expert. How did you become? Or actually, let's back up. What's a challenging scenario where you actually you experience being an expert in a situation where use of force was applied?
Well, so I want to break this into two different stages. One was back in 2009. I was the training supervisor. I got called to come in and test into a deposition to talk about an officer's training and records who had been involved in a shooting. And it went from, I just went in there thinking, I'm just going to go in and go, yeah, I swear this is a true and accurate copy of his records. And I was out the door, right? Well, that's not what happened. The attorney in that particular case started asking me a whole series of questions, and what I thought was going to be, a 5 or 10 minute process turned into 2 days of deposition, because in state court in Alaska at that time, there really wasn't a cap on how long you could be deposed. And then that turned into going into court and testifying. And as they were going through my training, my background, the plaintiff's attorney actually had me certified there as an expert in use force. Mm-hmm. And so, testified in that case. We got a jury verdict in favor of the officer, and I walked away from that going, I ain't gonna ever do this crap again. I just had zero desire to do it. And then in September of 2022, I had a defense attorney reach out to me. He was working a case where an officer had been involved in a shooting here in Idaho where he inadvertently killed the homeowner. And so he had been criminally charged, and the defense attorney said, hey, he was looking around for an expert within the state of Idaho. He had a couple of experts from Force Science that they were going to bring in, but he wanted a local flavor, if you will. And so he was asking around, and people kept pointing their fingers at me. And so he contacted me, and he came down and talked to me, and he said, hey, here's the facts and circumstances of the case. And he says, and here's the video, because the video had not been released to the public. And so I watched the video, and I turned to him and I said, I'm in. What do you need? Because, long story short, in this particular case, the officer was looking for a suspect. They believed he had a gun. He had warrants for his arrest. He was running through the neighborhood, and he was described as a white male with a black shirt and tan pants. He broke into the home of the victim, if you will, and the victim eventually chased him out of the house with a handgun. And the homeowner comes out of the house and he yells, hey, I got him over here. Well, the officer had to cross the yard to get to the gate to see what was going on. And when he gets there, he sees a white male in a black shirt with a handgun. And, they order him to drop the gun. He turns towards them with the gun in a low ready position, and the officer shot him and killed him. And unfortunately, it was the homeowner. I mean, it was a very tragic set of circumstances. And so that kind of got me going, and I helped out on the case. And ultimately, the judge dismissed the case with prejudice. And the obvious civil suit that came along afterwards was settled. So I didn't have to be involved in that case. But that's kind of what got me going. And then there were several times that there were some folks involved in the case that kept going, Matt, you need to kind of do this stuff on the expert side of it. I took about Well, that case was concluded in April of 2022. And then I spent probably the next 6-7 months just talking to people. I ended up crossing paths with guys like Jamie Borden from Critical Incident Review, who Danny King works with, and several other people. And so it just kind of started pointing me in that direction. I would tell anybody, if you're thinking about going down that path, the first thing that you want to do is find somebody to mentor you. So critical, because there are so many things when you're talking about doing this type of work. There are so many pitfalls and traps and tripwires. I mean, you name it, you can run into a problem. And so you really need to find somebody who's been doing this, preferably for a while. I've only handled eight cases in the last year and a half at the federal level. So I consider myself still learning that process myself. And then once you get that mentor, talk to them, then it's just a matter of continuing education. Last year, conservatively spent probably $10,000 of my own money, going to courses and travel and things of that nature, because it's critically important to get a good education and have a basic understanding of what you're doing. And you want, and even not even being an expert, just being a cop, being an instructor, whatever the case may be, you've got to have and foster a growth mindset. A constant improvement and development of yourself. And that's just one of those kinds of things where even if I wasn't doing the expert work, my position here at Post, I continually am wanting to grow and develop my own skill sets, so I can help be a more effective instructor, be more effective at what I'm doing. Because at the end of the day, this ain't about you, it isn't about me. It's about those folks out there that are just trying to live their lives. Yeah. In our role in law enforcement, what we're supposed to do.
Yep. Good answer. Thank you for sharing all those experiences and that information. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, stand by. We're going to come right back. Right now, we got to pause for the cause for Sergeant Be Safe, but we're going to jump right back in this interview. We'll be right back.
Your service has been temporarily disconnected.
Psst. Hey, Megan, you need those pills to help you feel better. Treacherous Tony can help you.
Megan, no. Don't listen to him. It's dangerous.
Oh, no.
Hey there, sweetheart. Looking for something special?
I've got this strange feeling something's not right. Captain Chaos, come on. We need to go investigate.
Investigate? But I just bought a new yo-yo.
Oh my goodness. I just don't get it. Hold it right there, Treacherous Tony. We know what you're up to.
And we won't let you harm innocent people.
You can't stop me. I've got connections.
We're not afraid of your connections, Tony. We're here to protect the community.
And make sure Megan gets the help she needs legally.
Thank you, officers.
You are absolutely welcome, Megan. Remember, folks, there's legal ways to get the help that you need. Don't let anyone take advantage of you.
And if you ever need a helping hand, Sergeant Be Safe and Captain Chaos are here to save the day.
And that's your tip of the day to get you on your way.
And we are back. Right back. That was Sergeant Be Safe, cartoon. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We're jumping right back in this interview. We got Matt Bloodgood. We just talked about some scenarios with training, with post, with use of force. I want to ask you this, Matt. What are some misconceptions that the public may have in the eyes of law enforcement with the use of force that you've experienced or that you may know of?
Oh, there's a lot of them. There's a whole lot of them. Some things are probably the one that's probably biggest in the forefront right now is, as soon as you say the word de-escalation, everybody seems to think that that means that you can talk to whomever it is and talk them into surrendering, talk them into a pair of handcuffs. Mm-hmm. The reality is that there are just some people that are just so bent on whatever it is that they are doing. And no matter what you try and do, force is going to have to be used. There's three things that really are required in order for you to have successful de-escalation. The first is time. You've got to have time to be able to engage with the individual. And if they're acting in such a way or their behavior is such that you don't have the time, you have to respond. You have to stop the behavior. Okay, so there's your time right out the window. Yeah. The second thing is, and borrowing kind of from Scott Savage from Savage Training, he does a video on, kind of describing de-escalation and what it really is. And he talks about it in the context of a noun. Is it a noun or a verb? But he said there's two things, that also have to go into this. One is the suspect has to agree to whatever techniques or tactics or whatever it is you're trying to do, and then they have to participate. And you need those three things. You need time, subject agreement, subject participation. And if you don't have those three things, or any one of them, those things, then a successful resolution without using force is extremely remote. Right. Other things that folks sometimes have a misunderstanding about is, for example, they think that you'll always have to give a warning. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not what the court says. What the court says is when feasible, you should give a warning. And sometimes, I've had conversations with folks, well, they need to keep giving warnings. Well, again, time is a factor. Yeah. What is it the guy's doing? And second of all, how many warnings? Yeah. If you look at it, when feasible, you need to give a warning. Well, A is an indication of a number. If you have time and can provide more warnings and try to engage in dialogue, engage in active listening, try and talk to them, ask questions. It's one of the things I constantly try to teach my recruits is myself and another officer that I worked with in downtown Anchorage. We talked about it being ask the next question. And oftentimes, new officers look at you like, what the heck are you talking about? Well, it's, don't get caught in this loop of drop the knife, drop the knife, drop the knife. Yeah. Because if you can kind of break out of that Ken Murray from Training at the Speed of Life calls it the goofy loop. If you can kind of get out of that and listen to a certain point, they may communicate to you. You're saying drop the knife, and they're saying, no, shoot me now, or kill me now, or my life is over, or, something along those lines. That might be something to cue you in to go, dude, why? Why are you trying to do this? Why do you want to kill yourself? And see if you can engage them in a dialogue. And hopefully it works. It doesn't always work. So, those are some of the myths. You get into... sometimes people think that you have to go through all of your force options first before you get to deadly force. Mm-hmm. Time and threat are issues there. What is it the subject is doing? Mm-hmm. And so everything has to be looked at within the context of that. Sometimes there's confusion about whether cops need to be there or not. Do they have a duty to retreat? And no, legally they don't. Now that doesn't mean there might be a situation where it's a good idea to get out of there, go get a bunch of people dressed like you and go back and take care of business. But those are a tactical consideration based on the facts and circumstances. So you just can't say, well, you need to retreat in every case. Well, no, sometimes we need to be there. Look at the flack that's happened, over the situation with that active shooter event down in Florida, and what happened there. versus some other situations where officers went charging in and dealt with the problem. And so those are a lot of it. There's a lot of misunderstanding about human performance issues, action versus reaction. You get into talking about, especially when you start talking about attention, which a lot of people understand that as tunnel vision, and how you're focusing in on something, and how can, sometimes you'll hear things, well, how can that officer have been so focused on this that he saw this over here? Well, it's the way our eyes and our brain work, that you focus in on a particular aspect of your environment. It's called selective attention. And I talk about in a training environment, the selective attention has two evil cousins, inattention blindness and change blindness. And, and these things happen to us in our workaday, everyday lives.
Yeah.
If you're sitting there watching a football game, or you're watching a movie, especially like a scary movie, and you're really focused in on it, and then somebody walks in or your cat jumps on you, and what do? You freak out. Well, should you have seen the cat? Well, no, because you're focused in on the mad slasher that's about to butcher a bunch of teenagers, right? And so, like I said, these things happen to us in our everyday life, and it's just a matter of, a lot of times when you're able to sit down with folks in a rational setting and talk about these things, generally they can come to an understanding of it, which goes back to why education for law enforcement is such a critical thing.
Right.
So,
yeah, you spoke of education backstage when we were talking as well, the importance of education, and how there's not enough funding for any department to actually train anyone throughout the nation to the level of education that is necessary, more likely for any occupation, because you want to learn for a certain level of understanding, for especially law enforcement. Then you want to constantly keep updating yourself with current information as well. Can you explain a little more on the importance of what you've seen on the importance of education in law enforcement?
Yeah, so education both within the law enforcement community and without. And if you're fortunate enough to work at an agency that has tuition assistance, take advantage of it. I joke about this. It took me 20 years to get a 6-year degree. And because life happens, work happens, and it's just pecking away at it one class at a time. And so it's that constant growth and development. And ultimately ended up with a master in science degree in human resource development, which is really organizational learning and development in kind of in the work environment. But also it's getting the education within your career field too. And oftentimes in law enforcement, we have this tendency to call everything training. And so I want to kind of break it out so people understand what I'm talking about. Education is kind of the knowledge base development, if you will. So when you go and you sit in a classroom for 8 hours, say, for example, that's more of an education. The training is taking that education and applying it through skill set.
Right.
And so you sit in a classroom and you get a lecture on, how to draw your handgun by way of example, and then you go to the range and actually work through it with you. You get the knowledge that you need to do it, and then the application in the training. And so when you look at what we do in law enforcement, how many different branches of skill sets there are out there. So, you have your patrol officer. Well, within patrol, you've got canine. You might have bike patrol. You might have, like where I came from, crime scene processing. You have accident investigation or crash investigation, depending on how it's called in your area. And so you've got all these different disciplines. Then you've got SWAT. Within SWAT, there's all these sub-disciplines between sniper and your less lethal weapons and dealing with other types of weapons that are not typically available to a patrol officer. You go to investigations. Good grief. I mean, you want to talk about some complexities there. Computer crimes, child sex abuse and crimes. Those two usually go hand in hand with one another. And then you got sexual assault. You got all your theft, fraud, forgery, and then you get into robbery, homicides, and assault units. And each one of those brings their own specializations with them. And so no agency really can afford to send people to training. And so it's really on us to develop a growth mindset and understand that, one, your department can't pay for everything. And so maybe you got to dip into your own pocket and pay for some training.
Right.
I paid for a couple of trips out of Alaska to go to training that I felt was important for my development. Doing things like, just constantly learning. You don't always have to step into a classroom. You can pick up books. Here is on doing safety differently. It's part of a class that I'm in right now through the Association of Force Investigators on force analysis units. And so there's a lot of ways to grow and develop that don't require you sitting in a classroom hoping that the department's going to pay for it. But that's on you.
Yeah. And here on Black and Blue, we do trainings, experiences, and publications at least once a month. And we got somebody coming in later this month, another instructional book. We had a fictional book last month. And we have instructional books for law enforcement throughout. So therefore, all the trainings and experiences that were invested into that individual author / law enforcement officer are invested in that book. And you can take and pick, get the chew up the meat and spit out the bones of each of those books. And that's training, lessons, education right there, like you just said.
Right.
Yeah. So you're also a firearms instructor as well. How important is the use of firearms? Well, we of course we all know the use of firearms for law enforcement is high up there. It's very important. We need it to protect ourselves, to protect the public as well.
Right.
And there's many misconceptions for firearms and law enforcement as well. Can you clear some of those misconceptions up that you may know about or have experienced yourself?
You got about 5 or 6 hours for this conversation?
I know it could go on and on and on.
Yeah, and the thing about it is, it's really funny. You can talk to instructors in all sorts of disciplines. Let's say, for example, defensive tactics instructors, and you can talk to them and say, hey, have you considered this, this, and this over here? And they're all over it. You want to have that same kind of conversation with a firearms instructor, watch out. You're about to have a bunch of fireworks. I don't know what it is. And, I want to be careful. I don't want to generalize all firearms instructors because I know there are phenomenal firearms instructors out there. Mm-hmm. But firearms is one of those areas, and I know I'm going to step on some toes, and I know I'm probably going to get some hate mail about this. But when it comes to firearms instruction, a lot of what we have done over the last 20, 30 years in firearms really has been this, I hate to use the word, but it's just this, I'll use a better one, legacy training. Let's put it that way. Yeah. Okay. And so you ask an instructor today, well, why are you doing that? Well, especially if they're a newer instructor, well, that's what I was told to do. And then you go to that instructor, and then they're going to go all the way back into training that might have been developed back in the 70s or the early 80s, mm-hmm. and without really taking serious look at what happens on the range versus what happens in reality.
Yeah.
And so when I work with new firearms instructors, there's a couple of questions I ask them. And the first question that I'll ask them, and, if any of the guys from Idaho that have heard me ask them this, they're probably sick and tired of hearing it. But the first question I ask them is are you training to reality within the confines of safety? Mm. If you're not, then why are you doing it? Then the next series of questions is if with 100% certainty that your student is going to be in a shooting tonight, would you train them different?
Wow.
And if the answer is yes, then how are you going to do that? And so those are really conceptually for us to understand that the vast majority of firearms training in law enforcement, and I know that, again, there are exceptions to this. There are agencies that are doing really good jobs with firearms, and so I don't send me hate mail, okay? But I've talked to cops from across the United States, and I hear a lot of the same thing. In fact, I just had a conversation with an officer the other day from an agency, and it's a larger agency. And really their firearms instruction is get to the range, get your qual done, get back on the street. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if qualifications are your driving factor for your firearms training, you're really setting the officer up for failure. Because, if we honestly look at what happens in a typical firearms qualification, you're on a square range, your target is at a set distance, it is non-threatening, it is non-moving, you're told how many shots to fire and in what time to fire it. How much thought process is involved in that? Listen for the beep, shoot your prescribed number of shots, go back to your holster, listen for the beep, or something to that effect, right? Mm-hmm. So what really happens out in a deadly force confrontation? The target is threatening, the target is moving, probably advancing on you, maybe running, maybe doing all sorts of stuff. You're moving. And oftentimes officers aren't accounting for their own movement. You're trying to engage, and all of these different things that are coming into this. Perceptual distortions, cognitive problems. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Mm-hmm. And so how are we reconciling those two issues? Well, the way that you do it in a training environment is you've got to try to duplicate those conditions where and when you can. Right. With the full knowledge that you cannot completely set up the same type of conditions that an officer is going to experience in the real world. Right. Let's say, for example, scenario training. So we put them through some realistic force-on-force training where the subject involved is moving, is probably shooting back with non-lethal training ammunition, and those kinds of things, or other types of props. There's a fear of failing in front of your peers. There's a fear that you're going to get shot by one of these non-lethal training rounds, and it's going to hit you someplace soft, and anybody's been in that training, we all know, right? But does it really duplicate the stress level and the anxiety and the fear and some of the other perceptual distortion problems that come with being in a real gunfight? No. But it's a little bit illegal and slightly unethical for me to actually shoot at you with real bullets, to give you that effect. And so how do we reconcile those two things? And that's when you run smack dab into reality. Yeah. What is the knowledge, skills, and abilities of the instructor? What is, how much is it going to cost to put on that level of training? What does your administration understand about that level of training? Size of the agency can make a huge difference. If you're a really small agency, you might not have the resources. I had one agency up until a couple of years ago, their annual training budget for 8 deputies was $1,500 a year. Wow. Yeah, and that included ammo. So how much training is really being done? Yeah. Versus you take like the New York PDs where, 35, 40,000 cops, how are you going to run through all of this level of training? And so you got that in between, where do you make that work? And I think that's where, we as a profession really have to sit down and take a hard look at how training, especially like firearms training is done. Take data, take information, and use that. And so, one data point by way of example, law enforcement officer killed summaries. The last year that those were published was in 2019. Mm-hmm. You look at the data that comes from that, and 89%, or round up to 90% if you want to, 90% of the officers that were feloniously killed on the job were done so at 20 feet or less. Mm. Then you take a look at those numbers and you drill down a little further, and you get to 57% of the officers that were killed feloniously are done so at 5 feet or less. Wow. So if we know that almost 2/3 of the officers are killed at 5 feet or less, what should our training look like? Yeah. If we know that 90% of officers are killed at 20 feet or less, what should our training look like? Mm-hmm. Now, some people might misunderstand me because this has happened. Does that mean we don't train at 25 yards? That's not what I'm saying. We need to train at those further distances, but that's not, excuse me, that's not where I put the emphasis of my training. The emphasis of that training needs to be up close. Now, if let's say I'm within 5 feet, and I go back to my old, field interview training days where they would say, you got to stay at least 6 feet away from somebody. Well, how realistic is that?
Yeah.
You got to close the distance and go hands on to put cuffs on.
Yeah.
Okay. Or I got to get documents. If I'm doing an FI on you and I want your ID and you got it and you're handing it over, I got to be within arm's reach of you. So let's take a look at and have a real conversation. So if I know that these things are happening within arm's reach, and I also take a look at the data that's out there, the science that's been done on action versus reaction, and I know how fast your average officer is in getting their gun out of their holster, and I know how fast a subject who has made a decision to attack that officer is. The reality is, if I'm dealing with a suspect and I'm within arm's reach and he pulls a gun, I'm not beating that draw. Not with my gun, I'm not. So now we have to take a serious look at, well, what else can we do? Well, can we get into incorporating defensive tactics now into our firearms training? And you want to have some firearms instructors, and I've talked to them. You want to watch their heads explode and start having that conversation. What that's going to look like, and I think that's that's a fight that needs to be done. Because there's a lot of stuff that's out there. In fact, I sent out a video to some of our firearms instructors last week of an officer's escorting a guy, and the guy's got his right hand inside of his jacket, and the officer's telling him to take his hands out. And as the guy brings his hand out, he has a gun. He turns to his left towards the officer. The officer smacks the gun out of the way, basically deflects what the suspect is doing, and that provided that officer with enough time to draw his own weapon and protect himself. And so these are the kinds of things that we really look at. Where is any of that if you just go to the range and shoot balls? Yeah. It doesn't exist. Yeah. So that's why that's where a lot of folks that are coming along line and pushing some of this more advanced training to look at basically using scientific information and data to back up what it is that you're doing with your training, because you can hear different terms thrown around. You're going to hear science-based or evidence-based, excuse me, or evidence-informed. And that's really what you want to build your training programs on. It's what are the best practices today. Right. And so that's the real trick is, how do we get there?
Good question. Good topic. Good points. Absolutely. And I know, hopefully it doesn't ruffle too many feathers too bad. But it's information that needs to be shared and put out there as well. Enlightening information, because I know we do train from some further distances, but when a lot of things, realistically speaking, we are normally face to face with the individuals that we're dealing with, from traffic stops, domestics, individual suspicious people, whatever it may be. And like you said, when you got to identify yourself, you're basically going hand to hand with just identification and documents.
Right. The thing is, it's not new. I mean, there's a book back here on the shelf written by two British captains from the 1930s, and published that book in 1942. And they were taking a look at officer-involved shootings for the British military police in Shanghai, China, back in the 30s, when Shanghai was a British mandate. And they looked at 666 shootings. Now, unfortunately, they don't put the number in the book, unfortunately, but they said the majority of their shootings were at 4 yards or less. So we're talking 12 yards. We're talking 12 feet.
Yeah.
And so their solution to that problem was, since the vast majority of their shootings were up close and personal, was what they called instinctive shooting. Today, you might hear it differently. You might hear things along the lines of point shooting or gaze coupled shooting or gaze action coupled. You'll hear different terms thrown about. And some people get really concerned about it because up close and personal, the training is you're not focusing on the front sight. What you're doing is you're using your body position and the weapon itself as the sight, and sending rounds because you don't have time. And when you start looking at wound ballistics and how people respond to when they're being shot, if you don't have that central nervous system hit, or you don't have a psychological collapse on the part of the individual, then the only way that they're going to stop is blood loss followed by unconsciousness. And so that gets into some, don't know your audience, so I don't want to get too graphic.
Yeah, I understand.
Those kinds of issues, but these are all things that we've got to take a look at, and how does it impact, an officer's response? And we haven't even started talking about, decision making and situational awareness and sense making that goes on prior to, and then how does all of that trickle down to over 18,000 law enforcement agencies here in the country? So,
good point. Good topic. Yeah, absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we're going to jump to another Sergeant Be Safe cartoon, and we're going to jump right back in this interview. Stand by.
Meanwhile, at the Hall of Justice.
Look too hard, don't stand too close.
Hello, Sergeant Be Safe, Captain Chaos. I'm your new district attorney, Justin Case.
Hello, Justin Case. Nice to meet you.
Yes, it's a pleasure. I'm glad we're all on the same team.
Yes, locking up bad guys. Let's go inside the courthouse and see the judge. We have bad guys to put away.
You are absolutely right. Let's go inside and get to work.
All rise. I am the Honorable Judge Mint.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Attorneys, present your closing arguments.
I'm a defense attorney scot-free, and my guys didn't do it.
The proof has been laid out, Judge. Sergeant Be Safe and Captain Chaos caught these guys red-handed.
What you mean red-handed? Order in the court.
I find these three guilty on all counts.
Ooh.
Well, I'm out of here.
I'm innocent. I didn't sell
What do you mean
crap.
guilty? I don't hack.
Good work.
Yes, job well done, team. I just want to say good job to our brand new district attorney, Justin Case. And from me and Captain Chaos, that's your tip of the day to get you on your way.
Welcome back. We're jumping back in this interview. We got Matt Bloodgood. I hope you guys enjoyed that cartoon commercial. We have a wonderful conversation, and I got a few more questions before we wrap up. Matt, I want to know what is your in-game goal as far as any of you being an expert, being a use of force, working with posts, anything in law enforcement. You've had a long and tremendous career, but let's just say in about 3 to 5 years, what would you say your in-game goal would be?
You were kind of breaking up a little bit. Is my end game and what I'm going to do in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah. There's kind of a delay on the computer link. Well, right now I'm looking at. I started a countdown clock, 51 weeks, and looking at retiring from post. Okay. I want to stay active as far as getting more into the teaching side of things. And the expert work, as far as working on cases, is important, but it's not my calling, if you will. I do it because I'm trying to help out as best as I can, but I would much rather teach and work with other instructors and really kind of helping them along. Right now, I'm really trying to learn to bridge between the science side of things and being able to talk to officers. In fact, one of my friends constantly tells me, he goes, "Matt, you got to quit being a propeller head," and so it's, how do I take a complex issue like, selective attention, just by way of example? How do you take a complex issue like that with everything that surrounds that, and how do you break that down into something that, somebody who does not have an understanding of what that is, how do you make sense of that to them, and how do you convey that? One of the guys that has been mentoring me, he says, learn how to take those complex issues and break them down into a 60-second bite, if you will, and being able to convey that to a jury or convey that to members of the public, so they can kind of get a basic understanding of a complex issue very quickly. And so it's really kind of learning how to do that, not just from the expert side of things, but how do I talk to other instructors that may not have that, and how do I learn to encourage them, to step into reading that stuff, because there's so much information available out there in the world that we in law enforcement just don't know about. Coming up through early on in my career, if the department didn't provide it, I'm not going to go out and pull up, scientific journals and, peer-reviewed articles and, on empirical studies and read them. I just wasn't going to do that. Yeah. And then I get into school and I'm going through and I'm having to read those things as far as being able to do my papers for class. I had to do that, a whole bunch of research work for my master's thesis and my defense on that. And then you go into, say, some of the higher level order of training, if you will, or higher order of education at the police level through organizations such as Force Science and Association of Force Investigators or Daigle Law Group and some of those folks. You're really getting into the deeper science, if you will, and you're having to understand that. And it becomes very apparent very quickly how much information's out there. Yeah. For example, when you talk about peer-reviewed studies, empirical data, since I just was looking at this earlier today, since 1996, something like 65 million journal articles and whatnot have been published, and it's an average of 5.5 million per year. Wow! And obviously, that stuff runs the gamut, but I was helping out doing some research work about a month or so ago, and we were looking on issues related to action versus reaction. And I was looking at Olympic level shooters. And what really kind of surprised me, I mean, it makes sense that this would happen, but it was really surprising to me how many empirical studies there were on sway. We're literally talking about how much body movement an Olympic shooter has. It could be due to wind. It could just be their own, no matter how hard you try to hold yourself still, there's still movement. And there's study after study on sway. And, and so it's a thing with us in law enforcement of learning to look outside of law enforcement for information. I'll pick on another really hot button topic, vascular restraints. So in the law enforcement world, we know it as a vascular neck restraint. There's an organization, can't remember their name off the top of my head, actually has the kind of copyright to lateral vascular neck restraint by way of the name. And so we hear about, vascular neck restraint, okay. And then people will throw out, well, rear naked choke. Well, if you look at you go into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I'm not an expert in this by any stretch of the imagination, which is some research work I've done. Rear naked choke, if you look at the technique, is essentially vascular neck restraint, pretty much all along the same lines. And here in Pocatello, Idaho, there is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gym that will teach rear naked choke to 8-year-olds.
Yeah.
It's safe enough for us to teach 8-year-olds. It's safe enough for teenagers to use in competitions. It's safe enough for a multi-billion-dollar industry in the UFC and MMA. But it's so dangerous that you and I can't use that technique out on the street. Stop a fight. And you've got studies that are out there that were published a couple years ago where over 85,000 applications in a training environment and over 700 applications on the street across these 3 agencies in the United States and Canada. No fatalities, no hospitalizations.
Okay. Yeah. Those are good numbers.
Yeah. So what's the reason we can't use it? Politics. You know, and this is why we really have to look at data evidence, you know, scientific research that's done, and we need to look outside of law enforcement for some of this stuff. I mean, what is defensive tactics? You know, depending on what agency you work at. Like, for example, Los Angeles Police Department has their arrest and control tactics program. They call it ARCON. Well, we adopted that here in Idaho. It's used across the entire state of Idaho. Well, fundamentally, what is a lot of that baseline? Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. A lot of ground fighting stuff. Well, why is there a lot of ground fighting stuff? Well, research shows a lot of fights end up on the ground. And so you need to learn how to operate and defend yourself and gain control of a subject from the ground. And so how much of that training is being done? So that's why this we've got to really spend time on research and looking at information, taking stuff from other sources and bringing it in. And you know, I don't want to necessarily shoehorn it in to try and make something work that probably isn't going to work. But, you know, let's take advantage of that. The sports side of the world, what happens, you know, what are the 2 major things that happen in use of force events? It's either firearms or some form of defensive tactics. There are billions of dollars that are spent, you know, on the sports side, you know, competition shooting. Good grief. There's untold, who knows how much money the military spends on that kind of stuff. Why not take advantage of some of that research? You've got all these different competitions out there. I mean, good grief. I've run across studies on, you know, for Muay Thai fighters on what is the most effective and fastest kick. Do we have to kick subjects in law enforcement? Yes, we do. Can we look at the research on how to be more effective at that? Because if I'm more effective with my kick, then I'm less likely to have to kick again. And maybe that one good solid kick in the right place, you know, in the leg, is going to stop the fight. Now, on the body cam, is kicking somebody going to look really ugly? Yeah, but you know, if I can stop the fight quickly and definitively, I'm less likely to injure the subject. I'm less likely to be hurt, and we bring this thing to a faster conclusion.
Yeah. Sounds like the lesser of 2 evils.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. Again, I appreciate it. Matt, we've talked about a lot of wonderful here. Am I coming through? Again?
There's a little bit of a delay.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I hear myself. Make sure I got everything turned down. But through the course of conversation, I may have forgot something, or we may have jogged your memory. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us right now? The floor is yours.
No, I think we covered pretty much what you and I discussed prior to. You know, it just I would just leave everybody with just the thought that no matter where you are, what job you have in law enforcement, develop and maintain a growth mindset, that just this continual desire to learn, have this continual curiosity, and remember, at the end of the day, like you and I talked about, it's not about you or me. It's about these folks out here just trying to live their lives and how we can go about best doing our job to protect those folks and protect ourselves in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, all good points, all good topics, Matt. I had a great time having a conversation with you tonight. I hope this isn't the last time that we talk. I'm looking forward to watching. I know you say you got the countdowns on, but looking forward to watch you teach and instruct. Still providing growth. You're in the growth mindset and providing growth to future up and comers, law enforcement guys and gals that are getting into the business, that are already in the business and looking to grow. And we're all learning from you. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate your time and for inviting me on the program, and happy to come back if you need me, and we'll talk some more.
Absolutely. Definitely will. 2024 is going to be an amazing year. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Black and Blue. Make sure you keep your questions coming. Make sure you tag, like, share, hit that like button, because that like button's free, and we're trying to get this information out there. I'm your host, your motivational speaker. This is Black and Blue, where we air weekly at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we go live with law enforcement or a first responder who is rookie season or retiree, and we talk about their trainings, experiences, or publications. And we did not fall short today. I hope you guys enjoyed yourself. I hope you guys are continuing to be safe and have a wonderful new year. Again, take care of each other. We're going to be going live next week. I got a special guest coming in next week. I would love to tell you who they are, but I'm not going to right now because I got to keep you on the edge of your seat. So we'll see you guys next week. You guys be safe. 10-4, over and out.
Dispatch, put me out at 15. There's a car blocking the roadway. They may be broke down. I'm going to go check on them. Oh, now that I have a closer look, I don't think they're broke down. Excuse me, sir. Is everything okay?
Yeah, I was just pulled over answering a text and looking something up on my maps.
Okay, but you're blocking the road, and we can't have that.
It's only for a second. Besides, cars can go around me.
It doesn't matter if it's for a second or for a lifetime. You can't block the roadway. That's not fair to other cars that have to go around you.
Oh, I didn't think it mattered. I guess you're right.
If you have to check your text messages or enter something into your maps while you're driving, pull all the way over to the side of the road, or better yet, find a parking lot and pull in there.
There's a parking lot right up there. I'll go up there to plug in the address.
Thank you, sir. I truly appreciate it.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Sergeant. Be safe.
You're welcome. And that way, we can keep the roadway clear to avoid potential accidents. And that's your tip of the day to get you on your way.